It's like this evolutionary challenge. The American dream was so successful at climbing out of survival mindset, and now we've succeeded that we have this abundance, and now we don't know what the fuck to do. We're like, what's the next step? And I think a lot of people think we need to keep going on the same trajectory, but I think it's like a whole new skill, a whole new orientation of life that we have to figure out.
Coming all the way from Minneapolis to Washington, D.C., we now bring you Enter the Freud.
Warning, this is for entertainment purposes only. It is no way medical advice. Listen at your own risk.
It's clear, like, the quote founding fathers or whatever, they wanted to build and create all these fancy things to make us feel super important. And there's like these giant artistic creations and the Washington Monument over there, which you can't help but see that it's like the national phallus, you know? But you can't help but start to think about like, whoa, what is this American project? We've been trying to do something. And you know, it's only us weird psychologists that stop and try to like analyze that and figure that out. But it's like, what the hell brought us here? And what's this spirit? And why do we build these giant things? So it's like, okay, what's the American dream? And I sort of think of that we forget that just 200 years ago or 300 years ago, like what humans did on a daily basis is they like woke up and it was cold as fuck and they had to start a fire like right now because it's fucking cold. Yeah. And then, okay, what are we gonna eat? And that's like what consumed human consciousness for like if you go back to evolutionary, like the millions of years of life forms, it's like, what am I gonna eat? How am I gonna get warm enough to survive? And that's like what consumed humans for 99.999% of human history. And now we've completely forgot that because now we're concerned about, okay, that guy's shirt is less wrinkly than mine, is like what I'm concerned with now. Yeah. But 99.99999% of the history of life is like, I need to survive, so I better kill that guy because he might kill me, and we're both gonna try to rape that woman or kill that animal to eat it, so I have to kill him before he kills me. But now it's like, oh no, his shirt is less wrinkly than mine. So anyways, back to my American dream, it's like, rising out of that survival state. We were like at the mercy of nature and starvation and disease and a bear attacking us, and it's like this trajectory to like emerge from that into like the man is now the master of nature and I get to do whatever I want, and I'm gonna build this giant phallus of like the male spirit like coming up out of the earth and conquering, and now I'm in control. And kind of my sense is that was the trajectory, and that we've been like wildly successful to the point where no one worries about survival anymore.
I think that's a great point.
We just wake up, watch TV. What do I want to watch on TV? What do I want for breakfast? Do I want French toast or do I want Belgian waffles? Like those, it's like we don't have to worry about what all life forms was absolutely urgently consumed with our consciousness 24/7. We don't ever have to worry about it anymore. And we sort of succeeded. And so we build this shrine to the success of the American Dream Project, which is awesome. But it sort of feels like, but it's created a new crisis.
Yeah, what's the new crisis?
Here's the new crisis, because we're here in DC and it's kind of like it's beautiful and it's cool and we're all hanging out. But when you think about America, especially like COVID, it sort of feels like culture and crisis and what the fuck's wrong with America and no one can get along. And it sort of feels like, you know, all the riots and shit that were going on, all the COVID, and everyone hates each other. It's like there's a new crisis. It's like that human evolutionary fighting drive needs somewhere to express itself. Yeah. And we don't actually really have a good fight anymore. So we turn it into these like ideological fights. Yeah. And here's what it makes me think of is it's like there's this saying that's become more popular. I've heard it more and more on like podcasts and YouTube channels. And so this is what it is. It's strong, tough, disciplined humans work hard and they create wealth and comfort and luxury and good times. Those things, wealth, comfort, luxury, good times, create soft, lazy, entitled, spoiled people.
Yeah.
Soft times, easy times. Easy times create, the soft, wimpy, spoiled, entitled people create hard times.
Yeah.
Hard fucking times will then create hard, tough, strong, disciplined people. But so in that circle, and what you hear is that strong people create good times create soft people create hard times create strong people. And we're in the good times and we're creating soft people right now. Yeah. And that's sort of what, when I listen to people whine about this, that, or the other, I start to think, well, we're soft people, and we're all like, I'm offended because like you didn't like address me how I wanted you to address me. I'm offended because you think different. It's like we're whining about like wimpy ass shit. And I think it's because the American dream was so successful. There were all these like spoiled, whiny people that need to pick a fight about something because the animal in us needs to fight. Yeah. But it's just because we're fucking spoiled.
I'm glad you bring up the success of the American dream, because that's kind of what it's so weird. I actually wanted to talk about that. I wanted to actually like focus on why is the American dream working? It turns out that this building right here, I don't know why I know this stupid fact, but I think it's worth something like $133 million. That's what they appraised it at. That's $133 million. Yep. And you're like, well, that's a pretty big building. That's kind of crazy. I couldn't tell you what happens in the Senate or the whatever House of Representatives or whichever one. I think that's what it is. I can't tell you what they do in there, but I can tell you that's $133 million. And then the last election, they spent $14 billion, right? So check it out. Instead of like, this is where I think we have become so incredibly successful, and then it's almost impossible for anyone of any expertise to make sense of the reality of what we're doing. Because if this dog and pony show of figuring out who's going to be the leader of the country costs $14 billion, that's 100 of those.
Wow.
They could build 100 of those instead of elect one dude.
Yes.
Like, you just have a row of them. They would go for so far. Like, if you think about it, like, seriously, think about, we're going to build 100 of them. Now we're getting into some actual, like, towards the pyramid empire shit.
Wow, that is amazing. Because when you go up to those buildings, when you actually go up, it's like fucking amazing how like majestic, like the stone carving and the size of the columns and the artistry. Yeah. It's like jaw dropping.
Yeah, this would go for miles if we just put them side by side.
Just over the cost of the TV advertisements that Trump and Biden did.
Yeah, to fight over that thing, because then we could, well, instead of just having Trump or Biden, we could just put each person who runs in their own house. Right? Like every whack job from whatever party that you don't even know exists, right? We could just put them all into their own ridiculous,
their own palace. Yeah. They all have their own palace, and then they can that'll satisfy their ego, and then they can stop doing their ego posturing thing.
Yeah, but then of course those at the top like Biden or maybe they should get like the allotment of 5 or 6 so they could build a really big one. Yeah. Kind of like those mega yachts. Yeah. And just get them to be bigger and bigger. And that's not a very big phallus, like from here.
Yeah, totally. Our phallus could be way better.
We could go way.
Dubai's their phalluses are really outdoing us at this point.
Yeah, we should go further. Yeah. But in all seriousness, I think the success of this journey, as you point out, that is what makes us soft, and the way that we have food production, that somehow we have like a 25% surplus. I don't even know what that means, right? I don't know what that means.
It's that we don't have to worry about food. No one has to worry about food. And again, that's an unprecedented thing in the history of planet Earth. So, like food is just not a thing.
So if food's not a thing, then we can get as fat as we want, or in our case, we can be as thin as we want to show off. Right? Because once you get really intelligent and you're really educated and you have a lot of discipline,
then you can be keto.
Then you go hardcore. You pay extra money to
only eat veal and blueberries. That's all I eat.
Yeah, straight up. This is what you do, right? Because when you're at the top, you're like, Dude, I don't eat any of that stuff that would cause you to appear to be of the commoner, right? It's crazy. I literally pulled up next to a dude when I was filling up gas into my Beamer, and I'm putting in like the cheapest gas ever. Yeah. And he
you have any cheaper gas here?
The dude looks in front of me. He's driving a Mercedes, and he looks at me and he goes, "I'm all hopped up on caffeine and McDonald's, bro." And I was like, well, that's interesting fuel you chose, right? I'm like, what do you got? Like, let me guess. In a Mercedes, got a PhD, and you literally drove that through the drive-through of McDonald's? and I'm like, and watching him, and I'm like, look at the gas going in your car. You're putting premium in your car. Yeah. Right? Premium goes in the car, and then McDonald's down the hatch, and he started laughing so hard. He's like, oh my God, you should have a show. You should have a fucking show. Dude, I would sub to that shit, man. He literally was all hopped up, and he's like, I would sub to that, bro. And I was like, what are we gonna call it, dude? What are we gonna call this new diet? Extreme McDonald's diet, extreme paleo, like on Wednesdays I'm paleo, on Tuesdays vegan, Thursdays McDonald's, bro. Right? Extreme. I'm extreme. You gotta do, well, because you could literally fuck around like that and kind of even succeed if you did it for real. Yeah. You could do one day McDonald's and you could look pretty badass. Yep. If all the other days were lined up. I don't know why I got down that silly rabbit hole. It's just because of the abundance of luxury.
Totally, the abundance, the luxury.
And knowledge, though.
I think that it's like this evolutionary challenge. The American dream was so successful at climbing out of survival mindset, and now we've succeeded that we have this abundance, and now we don't know what the fuck to do. We're like, what's the next step? And I think a lot of people think we need to keep going on the same trajectory, but I think it's like a whole new skill, a whole new orientation of life that we have to figure out. Because it's not about, well, I don't know, maybe it is about like the shirt and who has less wrinkles, or whether you eat McDonald's or whether you eat veal and blueberries, I don't know. But it seems like we got the like American dream thing was a success, chapter closed, good. What's the next thing? I kind of think. Because I think the reason everyone's all offended and everything about it is we're all just these like spoiled, entitled. There's this archetype, like Jabba the Hutt is a famous archetype that everyone kind of knows. But then there's this even better one in the movie WALL-E. I don't know if you saw that, like Pixar movie.
Yeah, I saw that.
WALL-E,
yeah.
And like they're on this like spaceship or something, and they're just all like fat, and it's just this like, oh, I want to eat this, and then the TV, and then there's like the virtual reality, and it's just like they're just like in the state that America's in. It's just like we're satiated and comfortable, and when you're in that state, like, oh, I don't like that color of paint. Like, that wasn't painted the right color. I don't like that rug. That offends me. It's just like we're in this like rich, fat, spoiled, overly sensitive, offended state. Everyone's getting offended about everything.
Well, I guess that's true, but I look at that as kind of like where our success has this little bit of a dribble of I don't want to say shadow, but it's some kind of a side effect of our success, because I think we are still winning really, really bad. But like, I'm a bit biased because I honestly just came from my grandma's funeral like yesterday, which my son says, he goes, that was kind of like a party. It was like this weird, it was a weird celebration, right?
Grandma should die more often.
It was so crazy because she was 95. And so they tell this story, which I didn't even really know, right? They tell the story of there she is like in San Francisco, and her dad runs away. So her and her mom and sister get on a train to Anoka, Minnesota. They go to Minnesota back in the 19 whatevers, in the beginning of time. Yeah. And they go over there. And so then they start to gradually build up their life. And then her and my gramps get together, and they end up here in DC. Oh. And then they end up in Connecticut, because there was the sub base was there. And so it's all about the story of their like unbelievable humble beginnings, which is like the poorest of poor, right? In this tiny little town in Minnesota that no one knows of. And then like their gradual rise into kind of military stardom. Yep. And then their life is just rich with friends, and just forever. It just goes on and on and on. And like I went to this funeral, and there's just all of these people I do not know. that like know my grandma.
Yeah.
And then there's all these relatives who I've never seen. And I'm like, oh my God, listening to this tale, and I'm like, it's literally the tale of the American dream. That there you are as, like back in the day, a single mom, that like that's supposed to be devastating back then.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Like back then, but this one is a story of crazy success. And I look at these pictures of, I gotta like sub right in here a picture of my grandma and gramps. They look like fucking movie stars. Huh. It's so crazy. Right? Like, I don't know if everyone looked like that back then or if they did. It's like so fascinating. It's so fascinating to look at that. Like, and then I'm in the funeral and there I am and I'm looking at these two people who come from this totally poor background who like climbed up through and they used the infrastructure of the government, like, because my gramps worked for the military. Yep. And then she worked for some kind of like nursing thing that you could join in as part of the war. Uh-huh. And so that's kind of how they got traction to get out of this tiny town where otherwise you become nothing.
Yeah.
And so, and then I look at that and then there's their two sons right there, my dad and his brother, and they've both, like, because of this, like, just small efforts, then they both sold their companies early enough to where they're still young, running around, both in shape and for millions each. Each of them, yep. They produced 2 millionaire kids. Yep. What the fuck? Yeah. Out of this, like, totally, you would never think that's possible. Totally. It's supposed to be the demise. Right. But that's what I came back with, this like thing of like
the American dream has succeeded.
It's real. Totally. It's completely real. Yes. But then it's like, oh well, isn't she white? Isn't she a white lady? Yes, she is. Yeah. Right? She's a white lady, and maybe that did something. Yeah. And then who she married was white, and so. And based on the time, 1920s, 30s, 40s, whatever this was, yep. In the beginning of this trajectory, yep. I'm sure that had a bunch to do with it. But then, if you look at where it is, it's well, that's a totally messed up story. The American dream for look at what happens. Like, you can't say that, oh yeah, well, all white people, if you just like tried and you end up like a single mom, then you'll grow up and you'll raise 2 kids that are really rich, and then you win.
No, right, it doesn't happen for everyone.
Yeah.
But look at the wealth that we're in. I remember reading something a long time ago that said poverty in America comes with a flat screen TV. You know, like, even the people who are impoverished, back to my point, is they're not starved. They don't have to worry about a bear attacking them. They have health care, so they don't have to worry about dying of smallpox, right? Yeah. So even they, compared to all humans on planet Earth 300 years ago, even they have this intensely luxurious life.
Well, yeah.
Because they get to like hang out and watch frickin' Netflix all day, even the impoverished.
I gotta tell you, my Uncle Tommy, a plumber from New Hampshire, was there, yeah. Right? At the funeral. He had some things to say about the white, poor, like working class, yeah. Right? People who like work, because apparently in New Hampshire, once you get above a certain line, there's no jobs for anyone, right? And so, like, he starts, I guess, you ready to walk? Yeah. All right, so.
Super slow.
He starts telling me about this, like, he's got these ideas that are very conservative, mm-hmm. Right? Because apparently, that must just be how it is. In New Hampshire, that you kind of end up with this conservative view, and it was like this idea that, well, what's going to happen is if a certain amount of this attempt towards equality goes towards those minorities, right? Like, if there's too much movement towards the minorities, well, at some point, then white people are really gonna rebel, and then everyone's gonna see it. And I said,
everyone's gonna see it. What's the see? What?
There's gonna be like a
race war,
a mutiny. Yeah.
Everyone's talking about race wars, man.
Yeah. Like,
And that's back to my thing. There's an atmosphere in America right now where people are like not feeling calm, not feeling safe, feeling like things are fucked up. And I think it's in sharp contrast to the fact that everyone's actually rich as fucking hell. No one has to worry about starvation. No one has to worry about anything. But everyone's like, there's going to be race wars or this or that, or, you know, it's like super intense.
Yeah. I don't think Tommy's views are. No, I think he's kind of like telling me about the people that he works with.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
He's kind of telling me about
what he hears.
Yeah,
the people he hangs out with are saying a thing.
And he goes to like shooting ranges.
Yes, totally.
Like on Mondays he shoots handguns, on Thursdays shotguns.
There's tons of people that are like preparing for like some kind of war, mutiny, insurgents, race war. It's like super common.
Yeah, it was. I got to say, my son was more kind of struck by it. He'd never heard anyone talk about this kind of thing.
And your son was like, whoa, what is this dude?
He called him the Tominator because he has this kind of like New England accent. Everything was like, it's like, hey, Uncle Tommy, hey, what is this? He literally said, park the car.
Park the car.
Like, yeah, we're going to park the car right over here. But it's New England, it's not Boston, his accent, right?
Okay.
It's like...
He's from New Hampshire.
Yeah, he's from New England, proper, like...
What's New England? I think of that as like a 5-state region or something.
It is kind of actually, right? It's around Boston, so he grew up like very much near, in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Like in a little town near Massachusetts. And that was the same story. Like hearing about my grandfather, on my mom's side is another unbelievable American dream success. Dude is an orphan from England, and someone like smuggled him over here, and he tries to join the army, and like he goes to sign up, and he goes, yeah, I'm Thomas Fairbrother, and they're like, they look in the records, and there is no Thomas Fairbrother, and so you can't join the army. So a year later, they call him up, they contact him, and they're like, hey, listen, yeah, so we figured out who you are. Apparently your name is something Thomas.
Huh.
And we figured out you're from England, and like people adopted you and smuggled you in. And so now you can join the army. And somehow they like got him into doing like the communications. And I don't even know what war he was in. It's so ridiculous. Huh. He did some communications things. So he comes back after the war, and then this company called Raytheon was looking for, there were no like electrical engineers at the time. It wasn't even a field.
Yeah.
Remember how we were talking about there's no neuroscience wasn't a thing when we started?
Yeah.
Well, imagine this, like in his time,
electrical engineering wasn't a thing.
There was no electronics in your house.
Right.
Period. There weren't TVs, there weren't telephones.
Yeah. There was no one had electricity in their houses.
There was no fucking telephones. So they had these like weird radios, ham radios, which it was called like a crystal or something, a crystal radio. You would like, you would buy, I don't know who you would talk to. Just randomly you get someone, hello, yay, what are you doing? My name's Fred. I don't know, right? So he gets hired by Raytheon and works for Raytheon for his entire life. Wow. And then like supports 7 kids to go and succeed into this so-called dream. Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy.
Like, but then it's like, okay, that was the story then, and here we are now, right? And so
now the story is like there's going to be race wars, so let's go to the gun range to get ready to what? To shoot people. Who are we going to shoot?
I see, because that's not our life. No. It's someone in America, and then we have to figure out, well, okay, if we're going to actually look at the discrepancy of, well, how is it that half of the country or a huge portion starts to believe in things that seem impossible to believe in? They seem to like gravitate towards ideologies that like a race war, a boogaloo, whatever you're going to call it.
Intense, extreme ideologies are fairly common.
Yeah, and you think like, well, who could believe in that? Because we don't believe in it, and the people we hang out with don't believe in it.
Right.
And so then it's like, it's almost like that story of the beginning you're an orphan coming over from some country, and then you build up and you create a family and you have this giant thing that happens with your life.
Yeah.
That was a story that really happened.
Yeah, and
over and over.
And I think those people, they actually had like a battle they were fighting. It was like a survival thing. But then by the time you get to a place where you don't have a battle, you're going to invent a battle. You have to prepare, you're going to invent a battle. It's come to battles. It's sort of like humans are battle warrior creatures. And so if there isn't one, we're going to invent one over something stupid like what's offensive to me, or what gang are you in, what color bandana are you wearing, or are you a Democrat or Republican, or like when they stormed the Capitol, it's like, what, Trump lost, we got to storm the Capitol, there's got to be a battle.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out, is if that's if the dream came up to here and then it's going to plummet off into the people who float around in these tubbies in that in the Wall-E movie, if that's going to happen to a large portion of the population, but then there's this other like warring part of mentality that happens, well then what the fuck are we doing? What are we going to do? We can't just like become vegan and then switch over to paleo and then decide on Mondays we're keto. Like, you can't do that forever.
My answer to that used to be, let's kind of walk this way. My answer to that used to be that I thought, like, through talking about it and building awareness, and like you and me talking and doing a podcast where it's like we're trying to like cultivate awareness, or through like psychodynamic self-awareness of like, oh, I do this stupid dumb neurotic thing because of unmet childhood needs, and I become aware of that, so I don't need to do that. And then with my patient, that like there would be this like that like I'm gonna be one little cog in a machine that's like building awareness and expanding human consciousness, and that ultimately we could evolve out of that. I thought that for the last 20 years of my adult life.
Yeah.
And increasingly I'm like, I don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I'm much more skeptical about it.
But so then, I still think we still have to come up with a story, right? We're still gonna have to come up with a trajectory that isn't one that ends in some kind of a coming to arms, one that isn't like right, and or what people end up in some kind of an intellectual battle.
Yes, everyone just loves to do intellectual battles.
Intellectual battle based on the most absurd statistics.
Right. Which
I really thought that would be funny to look at. Like, for example, imagine if you decided, okay, everyone's going to have to be, so when we look at people who are going to run the country and we're going to elect into these roles, like, when you become a doctor or you become a lawyer, you have to meet some level of proficiency.
Yep.
You have to make it through grad school, you have to make it through various doctoring schools, and then you have to pass an exam, right? Like, why isn't it that there's some kind of a school you have to go through, and then if you're going to run for president, you should be able to pass some exam?
Yeah, clearly.
And maybe if it's not one of a measure of competence, there should at least be one that, like the MMPI, where you're going to
mental health.
Mental health, kind of look at all the pathology.
Yeah. Ideally, there'd be one of like wisdom or maturity or
a new one.
Right.
Why not come up with a new metric?
Right.
That you're looking at, because if you look at the MMPI, it actually has like 70 or so various things that you look at, personality, and then there's like a huge host of pathologies. And then there's just a very small amount of kind of desirable traits they're looking at, including they check to see how much of a liar you are.
Yeah, totally.
And imagine what would happen if you gave that to the crew that is on TV today, that is just like they misconstrue and or obfuscate language intentionally so that everything that you say has more than one meaning, but on purpose. It's almost like that's how you get on these kind of channels today, is you have to have this ability to craft that. And I thought, like, just as a psychologist, that would be so fucking easy to do.
To craft a measurement. Yeah, and they would never do it. But yeah, it sort of you're making this point that seems so obvious, but yet impossible, of like, the people we'd want leading the country should be these people like who have this like really high level of like morality, where they really want the best for everyone. They're not in it for themselves. They're not in it for their egos. They're not in it to make money themselves or to like puff up their thing. Those are the people we want leading the country, right? Because they really have the best good for the collective. Those people are never the ones leading the country. And those people will never lead the country because they don't have the desire to do the battle, to step on other people, to climb up. So it's sort of like this inherent flaw. The people you want leading the country will never lead the country because they have no interest in doing that. They're not trying to climb to the top of the mountain.
Well, shit. So there's no golden age for they didn't figure it out. What I was hoping they were gonna say it's like next year, right? We could just be like, fuck yeah! Like, I'm just gonna go all in, right? Ready? Guess not. It's already passed.
Oh my God, dude, look at that sky.
Oh shit.